We don't use the internet, only the devil will use the internet.
This meeting is being recorded.
All right. This week I'm have the pleasure of speaking to Mr. Michael Witcoff, also known as Brother Augustine. Michael's the author of On the Masons and Their Lies, an in-depth exploration of Freemasonry, as well as Theopoetica, a book of Christian poetry and commentary on the art form. You can find his YouTube channel sharing his Benedictine moniker, Brother Augustine, where he posts book reviews, interviews, and commentary on cultural and political issues. His most recent project is the band Akathist with their debut single, Bones of the Living Dead, available on his YouTube channel. Michael, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here, and I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today.
Absolutely. Absolutely, sir. I came across your work maybe even a couple of years ago now. You were on Jay Dyer talking about your book on Freemasonry, and it was quite a fascinating read and conversation. I was researching secret societies and occultism at the time, and it lined up really nicely with everything that I was sort of digesting at this period of time. And also, I didn't even realize that I think you had written for Roosh V Forum back in the day.
I wrote for Return of Kings.
Return of Kings, that's right. Yeah.
Sometimes under my real name, sometimes under a pseudonym. Under my real name once I became Christian, or at least what I thought was Christian at the time, and under a pseudonym when I was writing more cultural critique and things of that nature.
Yeah, I discovered Return of Kings maybe like 2014 and 2015, sometime around then, and I think I wound up reading some of the content that you produced then.
Well,
it was really interesting.
Too much. I hope I didn't scandalize you too much.
You know, I was plenty scandalized at the time myself, so I can't be casting any judgment over here.
Fair enough.
Yeah, it's been an interesting road, because following through Return of Kings and Roosh V and finding we had kind of similar circles, it was pretty fascinating to watch Roosh's transformation, and then to discover that I think before he discovered Orthodox Christianity, you had been on the path yourself. So would you mind doing a little bit of a background for my listeners, how you came to Orthodox Christianity?
Sure. So at the time, I had been in my transition, if you will, from New Age, occultism, Satanism, black magic, Golden Dawn, all that nonsense, over to Christianity. But I was still kind of straddling the line. Like when I became a Protestant, started going to Protestant church, I didn't know anything about Christian doctrine or dogma. I didn't know what I was supposed to believe necessarily. I wasn't a Trinitarian at the time. And the Protestant church that I went to was very seeker friendly, I think they call it, which is what I needed at the time, where he basically, I mean, the pastor openly said, we don't care what you believe. We're just happy you're here. Come in, have coffee, meet people, listen to the sermons, you know. And he would get into doctrine eventually in little ways, but at first it was just for everyone who had any interest at all in Christ should come listen to the sermons, which was what I needed at the time. And so I have a very poor sense of time and the passage of time, but I think it was about a year. I think it was about a year, where I was getting deeper into the scriptures and whatnot. And this church that I was going to at the time, a Wesleyan church, there was a Israeli flag out front, along with the flag of the cross and the American flag. And a bunch of women in the church were on the track to become pastors. And so I approached the senior pastor of the group, who's very famous in the evangelical world. He was a part of Trump's little prayer ministry and whatnot, like very involved in politics, this guy. I went up to him and I said, with no animosity, I wasn't trying to have a confrontation. I was just curious. I said, okay, well, you guys call yourselves a Bible believing church. You know, you say that all the time. We're Bible believers here. But here in the scriptures, it says that the church is Israel, and it says that women can't be teachers that have authority over men in church. So how do you guys reconcile that with having this Zionist kind of perspective and with having female pastors? You know, I was just asking an innocent question. And his answer was, and this is paraphrasing, but only slightly. He said, because this is my church and we do things my way here, which I thought was a horrible, horrible answer. And so at that point, my mind started to wonder, whether there was something deeper or more deeply rooted or more traditional. I'd never heard of Orthodoxy my whole life. I thought there was just what I would have conceived in my head at the time as Christians and Catholics. And so I was good friends at the time, or becoming friends, I should say, with a guy who now goes under the moniker of Neon Revolt on Gab. He's got over 500,000 followers, I think. He was big into the Q stuff and deep down that rabbit hole. But at the time, he and I both had Facebook, and we were just getting to know each other. And we were talking about this, and he said, you should look into Orthodoxy, because he is baptized Orthodox, regardless of whether his beliefs now align with that. Sadly, they don't always. Lord have mercy. All this ETs and Q stuff, I think, has warped his mind a little bit. But he's at least baptized Orthodox and trying to live a moral life to the best of his ability, trying to stay chaste until marriage and, do all the right stuff. So I had never heard of Orthodoxy when he mentioned this. So I Googled it, Orthodox Christian, and there was a church, a Greek church, 4.5 minutes from my house, as it turned out. I lived on a mountain at the time, like almost a mile up at the top of it. And there was a church at the bottom of the hill that I could walk to in like 20 minutes. Great. So I drove over there, and I think it was a Vespers, the first service I went to, because Sunday mornings are hard for me, even now. I don't think my first service would have been getting up early on Sunday to go. And I walked in, and immediately you're hit with all this sensory information, right? You're hit with the icons, you're hit with the incense, you're hit with the chanting, and it's not overwhelming, but it's a lot of new stuff at once. If you're coming from a Protestant background,
absolutely,
where you're taught that icons are graven images, even though they have stained glass windows, which are, arguably icons in a certain sense, if not an Orthodox sense. And so I felt like I had stepped into a different world, literally, like I had walked into the ancient world, like just stumbled into it by accident almost, except not quite by accident, but not knowing what was there. And I really liked some things about it. And I was horrified by icons, especially the icons of Mary, the big picture of Mary behind the altar, the Theotokos with the Christ child. Absolutely horrified by this, in my mind at the time, idolatry. But at the same time, there was just something there that was fascinating to me, and not fascinating in like a vampiric negative sense, but fascinating like I have to know more about this. I've never seen anything like this. I've never smelled anything like this. I've never heard anything like this. And so I started going more often, asking the priest questions, talking to people on Facebook about it. This was before I was smart enough to avoid Orthodox social media. So I would get into fights with people because I was, again, not a Trinitarian at the time. And they were telling me all these dogmas and things I had to believe, which is not really a great way to introduce people to Orthodoxy. Here's a list of things you have to agree with or you're a heretic, right? It's kind of a horrible way to try and bring people in. But God sent a very elderly, sickly old lady who I didn't know at the time. Now I know is actually part of a schismatic group, but she's a nun. She's a hermit, basically, or hermitess for one of the old calendar, true Orthodox Church, genuine Orthodox Church, one of these things. But she was active in the Orthodox Facebook circles. And she was actually really helpful to me because she was speaking to me gently and kindly and helpfully. She sent me in the mail, she actually like printed and stapled together this 100-page book called Created and Incorruption. It's a series of Hieromonk Damascene's talks on the state of Adam and Eve before the fall and what our bodies will be like after the resurrection. Fascinating. I still love this document, which was a big game changer for me because I just never thought about any of this stuff. And it was so beautiful and so wholesome. And there was just some spiritual vibe I was just picking up on from it that made me realize, okay, this is a little more serious than this church I've been going to, right? Which was great at the time. I still think that pastor is a fantastically gifted speaker. He gives incredible sermons, and he's like 90% of the way to Orthodox in his beliefs too. So I'm always praying that someday he'll become Orthodox and become like the new St. John Chrysostom with this gift of speech that he has. And I slowly started learning the dogmas, the doctrines, the history, and I had so many objections. I mean, 99% of my interactions on Facebook were me fighting with people. Hard to believe, I know. But I would say, well, the Trinity isn't this polytheism, yada, yada, yada. And believe it or not, it was a Jews for Jesus article someone shared with me that actually convinced me of the Trinity, showed me where it is in the Old Testament. And I was like, oh, well, okay, there's clearly a plurality there's a community involved in the Godhead somehow.
Yeah.
So there's unity and also multiplicity, which I had just, they didn't talk about it at the church I've been going to. I think they had like later services at that Protestant church for adults and families, or for adults rather, instead of families, that were more deeper in doctrine. But for me, it was the first time I heard all this stuff. And so I was slowly working through all these objections I had when I discovered Father Josiah Trenum on YouTube. And I thought, there's something different here. This is something special.
Yeah.
Now, at the time I lived in San Diego. He is in Riverside, California, about an hour and a half north of San Diego. So I emailed him, say, hey, I would love to come drive up there and meet you. He said, sure, you're welcome whenever, come on up. So I went up there one time, and I believe it was a Vespers, but this also might have been a liturgy at this point. I want to say this one was a liturgy. And it was so hard to get this guy's attention because people swarm him. I don't know if you've ever met him in person or been around him.
No, not yet.
He's like a Pied Piper. I mean, you can't pry the people off of him. He's just like this giant magnet of Christian love that just everyone wants to be near it, So he said to me, kind of like, I think he was kind of dismissing me and blowing me off at the time. He was like, well, if you can find someone to watch all my kids, then sure, we can chat one-on-one. And I said, okay, deal. So I walked around this big church where I didn't know a single person, saying, hey, would you mind watching this kid? And there were like 4 that I had to, it's like a side quest in a video game or something. Get 4 people to watch the 4 kids. And so I got them, and I went up to him and said, all right, I got people to watch your kids. Can we chat one-on-one? So we went into his office, talked for about 20 minutes, talked about my Masonry experience, the book that I had almost published at the time, even though it's in a different form now. And I said, well, how can I, make this book the most useful to the kingdom that I possibly can? And he said, well, first of all, you shouldn't publish anything until you're Orthodox. So, if you're not going to become Orthodox, then, you shouldn't be publishing Christian stuff, more or less, is paraphrasing. That was the message. Yeah. And so as my first act of Orthodox humility and obedience, I did not publish it until many months later when I was actually baptized. But after that meeting, I drove back home and said to the Greek Orthodox priest, he's not ethnically Greek, but priest of the Greek Orthodox Church near my house, I want to be a catechumen. And so then on Pentecost of 2018, I think, 2018, I was baptized, and I published my book the next day. Maybe even when I got home from the baptism, I was so excited to get out there. And then everything just kind of snowballed from there. I didn't know who Jay Dyer was at the time, but people had mentioned him to me. They had mentioned me to him. He was out in California with his then fiance, now wife, Jamie, because she had family business out there of some kind. So we sat down to do my first introduction to the, Orthodox internet, if you will. We talked, great conversation for about half an hour. And then Jay realized he had forgot to press record. So we had to redo the whole thing. And of course, Jamie and this other person that was there at the time with us, they were just kind of sitting there chatting and listening to our conversation. And like I said, I didn't know what a small pond orthodoxy was. I didn't know that by being on this guy's show, all of a sudden a fair number of people were going to see me and hear my story, which was kind of amazing. I mean, it was a little scary. It's like, now I'm used to it. I get recognized sometimes, even though I usually prefer it when no one notices. I can just go incognito and not have to talk about myself, But sometimes people will blow my cover at a new church, say, hey, aren't you this guy? And from there, I just started doing my YouTube channel. I was cutting weight at the time, so a lot of my early streams were on a bike, a stationary bike.
Yes, I recall you.
The old bike streams. I'll bring them back someday. And just whatever was interesting to me, I would make a video about. It's largely the same thing I'm doing today. I have slightly fancier equipment now. I think I have my Blue Yeti microphone already, but I have my Logitech camera, and I'm not on a bike, better lighting. But overall, it's the same thing where, I've always been the kind of person where when I find something interesting or helpful, I just want to share it with everybody. So my personality hasn't changed in that sense, but the material I'm sharing, thank God, has changed from me to pick up in occult and marketing stuff to Christian material. And this is just where it's gone. And I just took that first step of getting a message out there, and look at all the fruit that it's borne. I'm here talking to you, people reach out to me, they want to chat about the story and learn stuff. So it's really just been an amazing journey and very humbling, and I'm just grateful for all of it,
God bless, man. Glad to hear it. Yeah, you're an interesting story because if I remember your history correctly, you were raised Jewish.
Yeah.
Now, were you like a synagogue Jew, or were you just like kind of culturally Jewish?
So I was part of what's called Reform Judaism, which is like the Protestant version of Judaism, but even more so, because they don't really push any kind of dogma. Most Jews that I knew growing up and still today are left-wing secular atheists, frankly.
Yeah.
But they like the privileges that come with being Jewish. They like the culturally Jewish thing. When
Yeah.
someone tells you they're culturally Jewish, it generally means they don't believe in God. They don't believe in biblical morality. They don't believe in scripture. But they enjoy the benefits like the community aspect or the nepotism, for example.
Yeah.
So I would consider myself more culturally Jewish growing up, but I still went to Sunday school and Hebrew school, bar mitzvah, all that kind of stuff.
Cool.
But I never really believed in the God stuff at the time. I thought it was all silly. And now looking back, I mean, I've learned way more about Judaism now than I ever did growing up Jewish, reading the Old Testament and everything. So yeah, it's been interesting. There's been surprisingly little pushback about my whole conversion, or fulfillment maybe is a better word. I don't get as much flack as I think people might expect. If anything, I get flack for still being ethnically Jewish on Gab, where I'm, attacked by the Wignats all the time. So
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I find like that group seems to be the most emotionally unstable when it comes to something like that. If you're professing Christian virtues and values, as soon as they find out that you have some kind of a drop of Judaism in you, they're very averse. It's an unfortunate situation, associating people's behavior purely with some kind of biological determinism is, I think, a real stumbling block for a lot of those far right wing groups.
It is for sure. And then there are people that are interested in, white issues or social activism to help the white community that are not like that too. So
Certainly.
I do want to be clear, like most people that I've met or talked to are not like that. It's like a very specific subset of people really on Gab that, and they're not Christians. I mean, they might call themselves Christians. Some of them have invented their own new Aryan version of quote Christianity.
Yeah.
But also, I also know that these people that are calling me every name in the book and cursing at me, these are the people that would never, ever say anything like this to me in real life. Like, sure. I know what kind of person sits behind a keyboard with an anonymous picture and name, cursing at people. Like they are not they're paper tigers, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't really bother me that much because I know they're just getting really giddy on the idea of like, oh, I want to say this word that rhymes with bike to a Jew on the internet, tee-hee-hee, like it's fun for them in that way.
Yeah.
But I don't really take it too seriously.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear it. That's fascinating. Were you interested in Eastern spiritual ideas and like New Age before you got into Freemasonry?
Yeah. Not that I followed any particular. Uh-oh, did my internet?
This meeting is being recorded.
So yes, I was involved in New Age, Eastern mystical stuff. I didn't follow any one particular school of thought in particular, but I would follow a bunch and kind of take the pieces that I liked from it, like a New Age buffet, if you will. I was actually first exposed to spirituality kind of in general, believe it or not, when I was in rehab, 13 years ago. I was at a wilderness therapy program out in Utah, even though we were also sometimes in Nevada based on where we were hiking. And they kind of incorporated some Native American like wisdom tradition stuff. And a lot of these programs do, like they'll follow the Anasazi way or whatnot. And that was actually my first exposure to like ritual as well, because as part of the therapy, they would design different rituals for us, like ceremonies, if you will. And there was something deeply primally powerful about that to me.
Yeah.
That stuck with me. And so after that, I got more into looking into these things. Like I'd never really been spiritual at all at the time I thought spiritual always is a good thing, which it's not. Not every spiritual experience is a good one, as I know now. But I got into, when I lived in Hawaii, which was after that, I would always hear about various hippie things, and some people were into Hinduism and Buddhism. So I'd hear about Ganesh, the elephant, or the Shiva, Shakti, yada, yada stuff. And then it was once I got back to the mainland and started doing drugs again, that's when I really got into the bad stuff, like the Austin Osman Spear, the sigils, the Golden Dawn, the crystal magic, the chaos magic. And the deeper I got into that, the deeper into Gnosticism and Hermeticism I got, because that all goes together, right? And so that was kind of, when I got to Freemasonry, I saw it at the time as like this brilliant storehouse of all these ancient wisdom traditions, which is also kind of how it promotes itself, as like a library of ancient philosophy, if you will. Especially the Scottish Rite would, I think, see itself that way.
Yeah.
Now, the irony is the first time I ever heard the New Testament was in the Masonic Lodge, because for your first 3 degrees, it's called perambulate. You walk around the altar a bunch of times with the blindfold on, while someone, the chanter, what do they call, not the chanter, chaplain, the chaplain recites a passage of scripture. So it's a couple times from the Old Testament or New Testament. So though I speak with the tongues of angels and men, that passage from St. Paul is said during one of those rituals. And that kind of led me to start looking more into the Bible too. And the irony was, the deeper I got into the Bible, the more I realized Masonry is not compatible with it. So Masonry led me to the Bible, and then the Bible led me out of Masonry. Now, this took a long time though, because when I started going to the Protestant church, I would sometimes go after a Masonic meeting. So with my suit on, lapel pins, Masonic lapel pin, square and compass ring, I would show up in all my Masonic bling. And a couple people confronted me about it, which was the right thing to do. I now do that to other people. There was a guy at a wedding recently that I saw, at an Orthodox wedding. He had a face mask with a big square and compass on it, and I made him take it off. I was like, no, we don't wear this in the Orthodox Church. And he said, well, other Greek Orthodox, I've been there, I've been to Catholic Church with this on, no one has a problem with it. I said, okay, I understand that, but I'm still asking you to take it off, put a different mask on. And he did. He wasn't happy about it, but he did. And then it turned out it was a guy that I actually knew from earlier as a Freemason, but I didn't recognize him because he had the mask on. Once I saw him with it off, I knew who he was. So it was a long transition to actually leave Masonry. But I definitely got there, like my soul was already open to the dark side, if that makes sense. That's kind of what sucked me into it.
Yeah, I can understand that for sure.
So yeah, were you involved in all that stuff too?
I was never a Freemason, but I was very much into occult books, and I once upon a time I was dating a witch, and she was very into those sorts of things. I always found it fascinating from like a academic point of view, but no, I can't say I was ever a Freemason.
Gotcha.
Was it the rituals that you were going through and then reading the Bible that you started after the ritual, kind of cross-referencing the Bible and going, oh, this is, I'm being sort of told to do things that are now I'm reading counteracting what I think is the right thing to do?
Well, it was a combination of reading scripture and the grace that started to shower down onto me as I started to make this transition, because I believe, and I know this is not an Orthodox dogma, this is just my own personal theologemena, as it's called, or theologemenon, pious opinion, if it's pious, I don't know. I believe that God rewards people to the degree that they possess and seek the truth. So for example, I think that God will share more grace with a Protestant than with an atheist, for example, because at least they believe in God, they're trying to live a moral life. I think there's some grace, some divine help along that path that comes from God when you're genuinely seeking him.
Yeah.
Not when you're fighting him, there's no grace, obviously, but when you're seeking him, even if you're not all the way there yet, I think he still helps you along the path. I mean, that was my experience. And I know a lot of people who have been helped in certain ways, just because I think they are genuinely seeking God. And so as I started to pray more and kind of be able to discern a little bit better, just spiritual discernment, and read the scriptures, where it's just so clear that when you read the Bible, God's very clear. He is the only God. There's no other God but him, right? And that if you don't confess the Son, then you don't have the Father, right? It's very, very clear. Well, I'm reading that in this Bible that Masonry led me to, and then I'm going to the lodge and hearing that the great architect of the universe is the God of all the religions, right? And this is some people's opinion that God would share, that the different religions were just God's way of sharing the same revelation with different groups of people in different places at different times. But the revelations, quote unquote, are wildly different. There's no way that's actually true, right? You can't believe that Islam equals Buddhism equals Sikhism equals Christianity and also believe in the claims of Scripture, right? That you have to have the Son or you don't have the Father.
That's right.
And Christ says if you deny him in front of man, the Father will deny you in the end times, right? Or he will deny you in front of the Father, rather.
Yeah.
One of those two things. I'm not a Bible scholar, so forgive my ignorance. But it just became super clear that they couldn't be compatible.
Yeah.
And around this time, I was invited into a special group in Masonry, a Masonic Rosicrucian group, where you had to be a professing Christian to join. So I thought, oh, thank God, there's like something here that will help me reconcile this dilemma, right? So I joined the group, and what are they all talking about? Alchemy, Kabbalah, sorcery, all these kinds of, like, it was an even deeper occult group than mainstream Masonry, because in mainstream Masonry, they don't tell you, they hint at this stuff, but they're not explicit about it. They're looking for the people that are explicit about it, and then you get invited into the group that they think you'll fit into. It's kind of how it works.
Yeah.
And so I asked one of the guys in one of these meetings, I said, but do you guys even believe in Christ? And he said, yeah, Christ consciousness, totally. And I thought, I can't stay here. I can't be here anymore.
Yeah.
And so then I was staying at a hotel at the time because I had driven up for this meeting of the Masonic Rosicrucians. And I was in the hot tub alone outside in the hotel. And I was just kind of praying and talking to God, and really this war inside of me, this internal struggle of how can I leave this group that's my entire social life at this point and go to something completely new. Like, if I want to really be Christian, I have to drop everything. This became really clear. And so I said this to God. I said, God, if I leave these people and these groups that I've invested so much time and energy into, that have invested so much time and energy in me, where I'm respected, where I'm an officer in 4 different groups, where I'm like what I thought a vital part of the crew, like, God, if I leave all this, I'll have nothing.
Yeah.
And then I know how this sounds, but I swear I heard, without my ears, I heard a voice say to me, no, you'll have me.
Wow.
And I just burst into tears. I mean, it was like, I was like a baby.
Yeah.
Seriously, just like pouring tears that hit me so hard. And so that gave me the strength to leave. And that was still a process, because as I found out, every time it's like Satan knows when you think about leaving, because things start getting set up that are meant to keep you there, which was really bizarre. But I could see so clearly how spiritual warfare works by this experience, where I would think, okay, I'm going to leave. And then all of a sudden there would be some crisis that I had to, oh, Michael, we need you to do this.
Yeah.
Oh, can't you just wait till the end of the year because you have to do this, this, and this? Like, there's no end to the number of reasons that you can't leave. It will never end. So I just had to do the hard thing and turned in my request to demit to the secretaries, it's called. And of course, they try to convince you to stay. But I made up my mind, and I left. I only got angry emails from one person who told me that I was going off to become a zealot. But he said, if you ever want to embrace the true light again, we will welcome you back with open arms. So silly. And then it turns out not all of them even knew that I left Masonry. Like, that's how unimportant I was. I thought I was an important part of this operation. But one of my old Mason friends called me a few months ago, asked me to help with some political thing he was doing, which of course I turned down. And then he said, are you still going to the lodge? I was like, oh, it's been years. They don't even know I'm gone.
Wow.
So it seems like this is not something that's super rare, because when I left, one guy told me I wasn't the first one to do this. I wasn't going to be the last to leave Masonry to be a Christian, even though to them, I'm just being ignorant and not understanding the true enlightened teachings of Christ, right? That are the same as the enlightened teachings of everything else.
Right.
But it was one of the biggest decisions I ever made, was leaving Masonry. And I've never, even for a moment, regretted it. Never.
That's quite the story. You know, I totally believe you when it comes to the emotional impact that it can have leaving a group of people and making those types of really challenging decisions, especially with a real spiritual experience. You know, when I lost everything and what eventually put me on the path to find Christianity myself, it was an extremely painful, emotional experience. And yeah, so I can totally relate to that. You know, basically going away from everything you knew or had been working on for a number of years, or all the people around you. But that's what Christ says, right? He didn't come to unite, but to divide.
Yeah. Yeah. I had guessed from the neck tattoos that you were involved in some non-Christian stuff earlier in life.
Yes.
But
That's
I
a
didn't
safe
want to
bet.
ask because I don't know how much of that you want to talk about. So,
Oh, you know, I was raised Catholic, fell off as soon as it was optional, you know, was very much in the world, as they say, you know.
yeah.
I've been an artist my whole life, so it was very easy to fall into artist circles, and there's no healthy spirituality there at all.
What kind of art were you into?
I've done all of it basically. I'm a professional sculptor these days.
Oh, wow.
I've done
That's
pretty.
cool.
Yeah. It's I really love being an artist. I've invested my whole life into it, but it has certainly put me in a number of situations that were not healthy for me, I would say.
I'm sure.
And you know, you're from California, so I lived in California for 12 years and got into all sorts of issues when I was there. Being very, very blind, you know, being very lost and trying to do things on my own and rejecting, rejecting wiser people's counsel. But even still, you know, I will say that I don't think that God ever gave up on me, you know, and it's a beautiful thing because I think sometimes had I not been baptized Catholic or been raised with at least like a basic Sunday school education, I could have gotten into so much worse than I actually did. And even when I was trying to live my own life, I always had those thoughts in the back of my mind and those teachings kind of itching in the back of my head. And you know, I was engaged to a witch for a while. And I was still trying to live like a Christian, kind of like a Christian life with her. You know, I didn't want to do anything absurd. I just wanted to have, I was a very blue pill, as they say, very blue pill guy, you know, figured I'd stumble into a relationship one day and that would be the one. And it would just, it would work out and I would get married and have a family. But it wasn't until like that experience, I really realized how different a lot of people's worldviews are and what's important to them. And, you know, being tied up with people who are far more lost than I am is very toxic and very destructive. And it was extremely, extremely painful. But by the grace of God, I will say he never gave up on me. And he's allowed me to find the information that I was looking for. Because as soon as that happened, I had to fix my life. You know, I had to clean up my act, get my health together, get my life together. Stumbled onto content that you were writing, even if it wasn't, you know, even if it wasn't a morally righteous stuff, you know, at the time, like finding the red pill and ultimately going through some more hedonism before I discovered that it was empty and hollow. And, you know, I've been a catechumen for a few months now, and I'm getting ready to be baptized. And I'm started this project this year to talk to people who have had similar life stories and have their eyes opened to the world. And
do you know who your baptismal saint is going to be?
Patrick. I'm going to keep Patrick.
Oh, awesome. Hey, today's St. Patrick's Day, right?
Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, you got the green on and everything.
Yes, sir. Don't want to get pinched.
Awesome. My wife and I just watched, there's like a dramatized movie of the life of St. Patrick on YouTube. Oh, really? It's a little bit campy, but it's pretty cool.
Cool.
The special effects kind of look like that old Power Rangers TV show. Yeah, I can send you a link to it afterwards if you're curious.
Yeah, I would love it. Thank you. Yeah,
I
that'd
mean,
be
he crosses
fantastic.
himself the wrong way because it's a Catholic movie, but you know. we
Yeah,
can forget that.
when I went to my first Orthodox service, everyone knew I was Catholic because I was crossing myself backwards, and but they were so kind. You know, they were so welcoming and so kind, and you know, kind of made a joke about it, and
Oh, good.
you know, it was really. So I knew it was the right move. You know, I've never felt more welcome and at home and like not judged in an Orthodox church. It's been beautiful. And even though that was a one I went to many years ago, and like I had to hop in and out and try different places for a while to find one that was, well, close enough that I could be a regular, you know, but also like just get to the point where I had the strength, I suppose, maybe a strength, I'm not sure, but to be able to stay after and talk to the priest and sit down and be like, I want to do this. I want to be serious about this. I want to participate. You know, it's one thing to be an academic, right? And to read like a book like yours and to understand why so much of the world and occultism is wrong. And to have the philosophical arguments of a guy like Jay Dyer. But it's another thing to start living it, you know. And I was there for a long time. Like all right, I've been convinced. Now I need to like put my money where my mouth is, I suppose. And yeah, it sounds like you didn't really have that issue. Like you were able to talk to the priest right away and get right into it.
It was a tiny parish, the first one. I mean, there were Vespers services where there were 3 people, the priest, the chanter, and me. It was that small. I eventually left that parish and that whole archdiocese, actually. Because part of it was there between the ages of maybe 18 and 60, I think there were 3 people between those age ranges. So I found another parish that actually had peers, you know, friends I could hang out with. I had a couple friends there, but more people my age, and so I ended up leaving. I wanted to ask though, speaking of artists, are you aware of or familiar with Saint Sophrony of Essex?
I know the name, but I don't think I've ever written any of his stuff, or read rather.
So this is kind of, I know people won't see this in the video, but this book is called I Know a Man in Christ by Metropolitan Hierotheos Vlahos. It's kind of his biography of Saint Sophrony because he knew him. Saint Sophrony, before he became Orthodox, was a painter of considerable reputation in Paris, actually, who ended up giving it up completely. I don't think he even became an iconographer. But this might be an interesting book for you to read if you're interested in the path of an artist who's also a very intelligent guy. And this guy had some crazy spiritual experiences. Starting, like he was seeing the uncreated light as a kid. I mean, wow. Really, really out there stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's always good to know that there are saints that went down the artist path too. And obviously I enjoy art too. I'm a writer and musician. So I'm not ready to become a monk and give it up, but
yeah.
Maybe someday in the distant future, we'll see.
I suppose never say never, but I'm also there with you.
Well, I said I'd never get married, and look at me now. So
yeah, that's wild. You know, it's been an interesting run. You know, your experience has been very interesting. How it's sort of changed your outlook on so many things. Would you like to talk a bit about that?
Oh man, I mean, how many hours do we have here? No, I'm just kidding. I mean, if you have a specific question, it might help me formulate a useful answer rather than just like
sure. Yeah. Well, I guess, you know, since we're both guys who sort of came from a bit of a hedonistic, like red pill world, like I find it to be very easy in those circles to forget that women are human. You know, they're human beings who have their own who have their own experiences and are their own unique people. And we, in the red pill, at least the manosphere or whatever you want to call it, that's always sounded kind of like a gay nightclub to me. So I never really liked using that term.
Yeah, now that you mention it,
you know, I never really liked it, but I will say that there was so much value in a lot of that for someone who never even considered these ideas, like these ideas of human behavior and patterns and this stuff. Like I had to go through that and see it to understand that there are greater patterns, and there are archetypes that you must fulfill to be who you truly are, and to just
there's a
make
lot of
things
stuff.
work.
There's a lot of stuff from that world that is equally applicable, whether you're a secular person or a Christian.
Absolutely.
There are certain,
Yeah.
I mean, with the caveat that what we're discussing is fallen human behavior in general.
Yeah.
But there are certainly patterns and truths that are found there. I think the church fathers were aware of many of the most important ones, writing about these things thousands of years ago. Human behavior hasn't really changed that much since then, if at all. But yeah, I had to go through it too. The blue pill kind of Disney version of relationships and women that you're given as a kid is just not real.
Yeah.
And, sometimes you need to have that bubble popped and figure out what is real before you can then move into a, I guess, baptized or consecrated version of that. But yeah, it's been very fascinating. I was very afraid, I'll tell you this, my fear was, so my wife and I, even though we were not perfectly chaste as when we were dating, we did not have sex until our wedding night. That was the first time we ever did. And I was very afraid leading up to that, because I'd been celibate for almost 4 years up until that night. I was afraid that once that door was open again, that I was going to go right back to my old self and just be back in hunter pickup mode and want to sleep with, everything with long hair that walked around on 2 legs. I should qualify that and say women, now that guys look like women have long hair. I'm not talking about them, especially in California, right? It's getting harder and harder to tell the difference. And by God's grace, the sacrament of marriage, I found really healed a lot of the problems that I had had with my lust earlier in life. It's hard to know unless because I'll say this too. I fell in that way as a catechumen, right? Between my baptism and my wedding night, I did not have sex. As a catechumen, I fell. And the withdrawal of grace that I felt from that it was like dying. It was like, I felt like I was dead for several days. I didn't even feel worthy of praying or worthy of repenting or worthy of asking forgiveness. I mean, it took me a long time just to feel normal again. And so there was another fear that, because that had been my previous sexual experience, that on the wedding night, somehow I was going to feel like that again.
Yeah.
And I was thrilled to discover that when you're doing this in a sacramental, church approved union, there's nothing like that. There's no sense of falling. There's no withdrawal of grace. There's no feeling of transgression. Obviously it still feels good, but afterwards, spiritually, you feel the same level of grace as you did before, which is something I had never experienced, right?
Yeah.
Because, each time you do it, even as a fallen person when you're fornicating, there's still kind of a blackening that happens to your soul. Even if you're not trying to be wholesome, right?
Yeah.
You still kind of feel dirty afterwards.
That's
Part
true.
of you still knows you're not supposed to be doing it. All of that is gone, which is fantastic. And I mean, especially for someone who lived the hedonistic path, I think getting married is such a needed thing to heal all of those. It's like that wounded relationship with the female principle in general, you could say, that leads to the pickup artist lifestyle. It's so healing to be in a monogamous Christian marriage, which is obviously the polar opposite of the pickup lifestyle.
Yeah.
And I know Roosh, I think, goes back and forth in his mind every day about whether to become a monk or get married. He asked Hieromonk Damascene, who was not helpful because he told him, I could see you going in either direction. I think Roosh wanted more of an answer than that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I wonder what he's going to end up doing. I mean, he already has a very monastic character about him, kind of a monastic personality and lifestyle.
Yeah.
But at the same time, Roosh, if you're listening, this wounded relationship with the idea of women, I mean, is there a more powerful way to heal that than by getting married and working through all that stuff? I don't know. That's above my pay grade.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel you with that too. And I was speaking from my own experience. I always expected to get married. I never thought that I wouldn't. And I kind of took it for granted. I kind of took that idea for granted because I almost got into something that would have been absolutely devastating. Just breaking it off at the time was enough to completely knock the pillars of my world out. So had I gotten married and then it happened later, it would have been really devastating to me as.
Yeah.
you know,
Are you married
form.
now?
I'm not, but I'm trying to do the chastity thing. You know, I'm a catechumen. I'm trying to take this very seriously. The last thing I really want is to get, you know, to fall and relapse into these sorts of things, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's no fun, I'll tell you that.
No, it's not, because I know exactly how you feel. Like, you know, every time you kind of like fornicate, which is the proper word for it, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
A part of you is just like, what am I doing? Like, why did I do this? You know, it's hard to get through your prayers, you know. Sometimes you don't even, sometimes I you know, I would step back from the prayers and sit to myself, and you get that doubt in your mind, and it comes out of nowhere, and I don't know where it comes out of, like probably some kind of guilt or something, but it's the devil trying to pull you back into that old life you're just trying to claw your way out of, you know. Like, I'm just trying to not, you know, you mentioned that you'd been in rehab, and, you know, I used to do a lot of drugs. I used to have a lot of problems with a lot of these. I mean, I was a musician and an artist living in California. Like, I went to art school. Like, it comes with the terror, you know. And fortunately, I was able to like not do the worst of the things that I was presented with, thank God. But you know, it's hard to really change your life when you have, especially when you have people around you who don't understand these sorts of things. They don't understand the spiritual search for truth. They don't even believe in truth. You know, they don't understand, like, you're trying to improve your life. And also, I think it's in some way inside of them, they feel attacked because they don't really want to reevaluate what they're doing. So they want to pull you into all of the bad stuff that they're doing. And I feel this quite heavily.
Have you ever heard the, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just
No.
something I thought you might like. Have you ever heard the crabs in a net analogy?
I've heard the crabs in a bucket analogy.
It might be a bucket where one tries to leave and the other one's immediately clamped down on it with the claws.
Yes.
That's so true for whenever you try to get out of some bad situation.
Yeah.
The other crabs don't want you to leave.
They don't. You know, they want you to just confirm that, you know, if they can get you to do it, then it like alleviates their guilt or anxiety, you know, and they don't have to take a look at themselves. But, you know, it's a challenging road. But I'm open to, you know,
God's help.
Well, I think it's beautiful that you've been able to get yourself out of that life. And, you know, when you mentioned on one of your live streams a little bit ago that you were getting married, I don't even think you mentioned it. Maybe you just posted a picture of you in your suit getting married, and it kind of came out of nowhere. And it's like, well, wow, this is a real example of life, of getting out of a dark spot and becoming better, you know, like following the path and making it work. And it's I think it's a fantastic example. And it shows how Christianity can change you if you allow it to, if you want it to, because it has in so many aspects of my life. Like, I am such a happier person. I don't have the despair that I once did. I don't have like that, the crushing depression that I once had, you know, like, oh, so many of the demons that like I was just filled with are gone. And it sounds almost kind of silly saying it, you know, from a secular you know, being a secular person so long, like, it seems kind of like it's hard for me to even say these things out loud sometimes because I'm thinking them, but saying them is a completely different experience. But it's so true.
You'll get used to it.
Yeah. Yeah. But
because when you're first entering Christianity, your baseline, your default is still the secular world you came from.
Yeah.
And so talking about Christian stuff, going to church, like, that's the other for you. That's the different thing. Yeah. But once you've been Christian long enough, and orthodoxy is like the main root of your life, like, then it's the secular stuff that becomes other and different and apart from you. Yeah. But that transition takes a while, but eventually you'll start to, like, this will just be normal for you. And then when you hear people talking about the secular things, that'll strike you as like weird and alien. Which is good. It's a sign that you're starting to take on the mind of Christ, right? The phronema of the church and the fathers. But it certainly takes a while. Yeah,
absolutely. But it's all a process, right? You know, you can't want to rush these things. You just got to take it one day at a time.
Absolutely. And it's a never ending process that it will last your entire life, whether that's another hour or another 80 years, we never know.
Yeah.
But there is no end to it. And if you ever find yourself thinking, okay, I'm a good Orthodox Christian, I've got a handle on this, I'm headed towards sainthood, you're going to have the rug ripped out from under you in a very painful way, just to remind you of what's really going on.
I believe it. I absolutely believe it.
Yeah.
So with that being said, is your Brother Augustine YouTube channel,
Mm-hmm.
what was the impetus behind that? Now that, I believe you started it after you were on the path to Christianity.
Yeah. Well, Brother Augustine is my Benedictine title, if you want to call it that, because I'm an oblate of Saint Benedict, which is part of a Western Rite Orthodox monastery. Saint Augustine is my patron saint. I mean, he's not only one of the most prolific writers that's ever lived. I mean, the guy wrote at least 140 different things that we know of, but he lived such a similar life in some regards. I don't know if you've read his book Confessions, but this was a guy who lived for the world, really.
Yeah.
Living the high life, as a fancy lawyer and orator in the Roman Empire. To his credit, I think he was monogamous to his concubine once they had a kid. I think he genuinely loved her, but he couldn't marry her because she was a slave. You couldn't do that in the Roman Empire. In fact, Saint Justinian, if I remember correctly, had to change the laws of the empire in order to marry the woman that became Saint Theodora, because he couldn't marry her. She was from a different class. And that was obviously after the time of Saint Augustine. So Brother Augustine is my Benedictine name, and the channel's gone through a couple different variations. Like originally the icon, or the little thumb, the picture of the channel, the profile picture, was an icon of Saint Augustine with sunglasses on. A lot of people really hated that, rightfully so in retrospect. But I fought them on it at first. I said, oh, what's the big deal? And then I realized, it makes more sense to have, like, first of all, not be changing an icon and adding something secular to it, but to have a kind of logo or symbol, if you will, that's recognizable across platforms. People see it, they know it's my content. I love it because it's a shield with an Orthodox cross, like it's defending the Orthodox faith. That's kind of the purpose of the ministry. It's apologetics. It's defending the faith, teaching about the faith, as I like to say, educating, entertaining, and edifying the world from an Orthodox Christian perspective. And it's been 3 years now, I think, and it's a lot of fun for me. I learn a ton just doing these videos, especially this Christ and the Minor Prophet series that I'm doing now. The video on Saint Obadiah came out today, on the book of Obadiah. I'm doing these videos on Rockfin for the premium members, and then a month after they come out on Rockfin, they become available for public viewing. And I just love doing the interviews and meeting all these interesting people. And now you've got, a new generation of Orthodox content creators coming out. Like, I wasn't trying to be part of something at the time. I wasn't trying to be part of the orthosphere, as Roosh eventually coined it. I wasn't trying to be in the club with Jay Dyer and these other people. Like, I was just doing my own thing. And then you just connect with other people who are also doing their own thing. And then eventually you have like a crew, you have a group of people that are all on the same team, each with their own, unique take on things from different backgrounds. Jay's got his philosophy and film background. I have my Judaism and occult background. DPH has his, psychedelics background, and he's getting his degree and all that kind of stuff. Psychedelics as a new religion. So you just get all these different takes, and, it's awesome to see the growth of Orthodoxy online. No one has more subs than actually Brother Nathaniel had the most before he was banned from YouTube.
Yeah.
Father Spiridon's got a great channel. Father Josiah Trenemont, Patristic Nectar, amazing channel. Father Peter Here's the Orthodox Ethos. So it's great to see clergy and lay people, working together, hitting all the different angles of things to reach the widest possible group of people. Paul said, to the Greeks, I'm a Greek. To the Jews, I'm a Jew. I become all things to all men, so that by all possible means I might save some. And I feel like that's what the Orthodox internet is. It's all things to all people, right?
Yeah.
If you want short saintly teachings, you go to Father Spiridon. You want spicy anti-Masonry or Jewish related content, maybe you watch some of my stuff, right? You want film critiques, you go to Jay. So I feel like there's something for everyone. And the more people join in on this, the more we'll reach. And most people have no idea what Orthodoxy is in this country. No idea. I've never heard of it.
Yeah.
So I'm just hoping and praying that all of our work together, and now your channel coming up too, I hope it gets big and popular as well.
Thank you.
Just changing the way things are done here, and especially as the Catholic Church falls apart under their Pope, a lot of those disaffected Catholics that love the liturgy and they love Christ and they love church, they're looking for somewhere to go.
Yeah.
And the more of our apologetics and wisdom they hear, a lot of them are converting, thank God. So hopefully that we'll just keep it up, and God's in control of this ship, right? He's the one steering it, and we just pray he continues to do so.
Absolutely. I think you're absolutely right about that. I've never had so much immediate welcome to speak, to talk to people, to hear other people's ideas. Our community, or whatever you want to call it, is so welcoming, because like you said, I'd never heard of Orthodoxy. I knew there was a schism. Like when I was a kid, I grew up Roman Catholic. I knew there was a schism, but it was never really explained. Like this idea of another group of Christians was not even extrapolated on.
Your audio went out there. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
This meeting is being
All right,
recorded.
technical difficulties, but we're back. Gotta love it. Yeah. Well, I have had you for a little longer than we had planned, and I want to be respectful of your time. So I would love to take the last couple minutes to just ask you what your plans are coming up, and what are the things on the menu for Brother Augustine?
Well, I definitely plan to continue doing the music stuff. In fact, I just got this Akai MPK MIDI keyboard controller.
Nice.
That I'm playing with a little bit. The music thing is so much fun. I grew up listening to Judas Priest and Iron Maiden, and just dreaming of being a vocalist in a metal band, and now I get to do that for the glory of God. I mean, that's just the coolest thing. And it was kind of scary to put our single out, because I've never released any kind of singing in public before. No one had ever heard me sing before. And people really responded well to it, which was phenomenal. I'm so humbled and grateful for that.
Yeah, it's a great song.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank God. I've started work on another book that I started work on a while ago and took a break from, because I lost a bunch of the files, and I just kind of got depressed about it. It was like, all right, whatever. But I'm going back to work on it because I think it's really edifying stuff. I have no idea when that's going to be out. I'm going to keep doing this Christ and the Minor Prophet series. I'm going to do all the minor prophets. I think I'm 3 in, and I'm working on the 4th one right now, which is the book of Jonah, the very famous story of Jonah and the fish. It doesn't actually say whale. It says a great fish.
Yeah.
And in June, I'm pretty sure this is going to happen. Father Deacon Ananias is still working out the last details. I'm pretty sure in June, like 16th through 19th or so, we're going to have our next big Orthodox speakers event in Montana, in Butte.
Montanica.
So this one's not going to be called Montanica, because it's put on by Patristic Faith, and we're going to have a bunch of clergy speakers too.
Okay.
So I think they're trying to call it something else, focused on missions and evangelism, from what I understand. But what we're trying to pull off is basically a bunch of clergy speakers, and then all the quote ortho bro speakers, at least the ones that can make it, that were in Montanica last year. Room for about 125 people. Tickets are not available yet, but when they are, I will certainly let everyone know.
Yeah.
So that's going to be fun. And other than that, my plans, especially during Lent, are just to continue weeping over my sins and begging God to please remove them from me. I've realized I'm quite addicted to my own ego in a way that's not helpful for me or anyone else. So I need to, ask God to just slowly prune those thorny vines off of my heart. We all develop these, I think, defense mechanisms or coping mechanisms as a kid, just to deal with our circumstances.
Yeah.
That later in life can really stop us from having the Holy Spirit indwelling us the way that I think we all want to, the way that He certainly wants to be radiating in us and living in us. Just continue down the Orthodox path. My wife and I are trying to have a kid, so hopefully that'll be a thing that happens in the near future. We don't believe in birth control or practice any form of it, as is, I believe, the canonical traditional Orthodox way.
I believe so.
And yeah, just keep doing this and meeting new people and making connections, networking with other Orthodox content creators, and trying to reach as many people as I can to help them, to win souls and bring them to church.
Sounds excellent, man. And we didn't really get into too much current events or anything, but I think it'd be a little bit remiss in saying that the state of the West is not looking great at best. Things are pretty rough across the board for, I think, a lot of people, both millennials, Zoomers. Even I know a lot of Gen Xers who are, we're all feeling the pressure if you're keeping your eyes open. So, what would you say? Do you have any words of wisdom or things that help you in these strange times that you might give a little bit of a hope to my listeners who have made it all the way to the end of this?
So news is one of the things I've given up for Lent. I'm fasting from news. I haven't watched a second of it or read any of it since Lent began. And I definitely recommend that to people, because you can't separate the media from the bias of the person who's in charge of it. There's no such thing as a neutral objective. I mean, maybe a couple of very specific people, but I mean, the stories they choose to show you or not show you, someone makes those decisions, and that person's beliefs and prejudices and inclinations will make that decision. And then of the stories they do choose to share with you, they also choose how to frame it, right? Who's the good guy? Who's the bad guy? They have to make it very clear cut, like a comic book of heroes and villains. One side is totally good. The other side is the incarnation of pure evil. Because unfortunately, Americans, the education system is not very good. People are not very smart in general. They're not taught how to think critically anymore. They're not taught how to think. They're taught what to think. So a lot of people, information has to be dumbed down to this level of pure good versus pure evil for them to process anything, but it's just not reflective of reality. Things are complex, and this is a very old propaganda thing. I mean, this is not new. So I'm not like I'm picking on Americans by saying this necessarily.
Yeah.
This has always been the case of dividing things into two camps. Here's an issue. Are you team A or team B? Okay, well, what if I just don't want to play this game at all? What if I don't want to be on either team because I don't think they're real? I find that to be much more spiritually healthy, because even if you're on the quote correct team or the correct side of an issue, assuming there's a correct side, you're still only thinking about it and talking about it because the media told you what to think and talk and care about. And when you withdraw from that, when you say to the media, no, you do not have my consent to dictate the contents of my mind, you don't have my permission to tell me what to think or what to think about, I've found during these last couple of weeks that has gone to great lengths to help my eyes turn more inward and look at my own problems, my own darkness. We can spend the rest of our lives looking at the darkness in the world outside of us, and we won't be bored for a day. We're never going to run out of darkness out there to look at and think about and talk about. But we can do that our whole lives and never once look inward. So I would encourage people to remove your awareness, remove your attention from the world, and put your awareness inwards on your own nous, as the Orthodox call it, our own organ of awareness, our spiritual organ of awareness and attention, if you will, because that's the thing we really have to get a rein on. We have to rein it in, stop it from being scattered through our senses, and focus it inwards on itself, because that's the state of hesychasm and stillness in which Christ can dwell. And as long as you're letting the world outside dictate your map of things and scatter your nous, scatter your awareness through different visions and pictures and images on the TV or sounds you hear listening to podcasts about the news all day, well, all of that is taking your attention away from where it should be, which is primarily on yourself. And I'm not saying this in like a self-centered way at all. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that a big part of our Orthodox walk is learning to take our awareness away from things that, first of all, we have no control over anyway. So it's kind of a big waste of time for us to worry about it. Mm-hmm. And second of all, it doesn't aid your spiritual life at all. I mean, just these last couple of weeks of separating from this, when I look at my Telegram, for example, like there's this immediate like icky feeling when I see people talking about the news and trying to evoke anger. So that's really, I know this is a long answer to a short question, but I would say, as a general rule, I would avoid any person, thing, media outlet, event, anything that seeks to evoke a strong emotion in you, because they're doing that to control you. They're not doing that because it's helpful to you. They're doing it because when you're in a state of emotion, whether it's excitement, desire, anger, hatred, lust, whatever, any strong passion that they can evoke from you, that makes you really easy to control because you're not in control of yourself when a passion has this grip on you, right?
Yeah.
So I would just avoid anything that makes you feel strongly, except for church, because you should be feeling conviction and contrition and holiness there. And I think if you do that, all these problems in the world that, by the way, are going to continue to exist with or without you paying attention to them,
Mm-hmm.
at least you will be not letting it hurt you as much. And the more sanctified you get, you can then share that with other people and help sanctify them, because that's how to protect yourself from it. You know, you're not going to fix the country. You're not going to fix the world. I know we all want to. Believe me, I'm right there with you. I see the problems. I have the solutions. But like the old Greek philosopher Herodotus once said, there's no greater pain a man can feel than to have insight into much and power over nothing. But what we do have power over is where we place our attention. So I'm encouraging people, especially during Lent and even afterwards, place your attention on Christ and the image of God in yourself, so that the likeness of God can be restored along with that image, and you can become, by grace, what he is by nature.
That's an excellent answer, sir.
Thank God.
Thank God. Well,
I pretended to not be stupid for a moment, so I'm glad that
well, you fooled me. Well, Michael,
mission accomplished.
I want to thank you again for taking the time this afternoon to come and talk with me and share with me your story and your ministry. And I hope everybody who hasn't heard of Brother Augustine goes on YouTube and checks him out. And hopefully when that book you're talking about is done, you'll come back on the show and talk to me about it.
Totally, man. I've had a great time. You know, it's always great to meet other people from similar backgrounds, and your journey is just beginning. So I pray that your catechumenate will go well. I'm stoked. Please let me know when you get baptized, because you know you're a heretic until then. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I'll let you know. I'll even get you a copy of the book, and I'll be happy to come talk about it with you.
Beautiful. Well, Michael, thank you very much, and glory to God for all things.
Amen, brother. Amen.
Amen.